I've replayed that moment in my mind 1,000 times. The moment I reached into my purse, pulled out my house key, and placed it in the trembling hand of a complete stranger. People tell me I'm crazy. They tell me I'm lucky to be alive, lucky I didn't lose everything. But when I close my eyes and remember that rainy November evening at LAX, I don't regret what I did. Not for a second. Though I had no idea what was actually coming. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm a pharmaceutical sales representative. Or at least, I was. This story is about the week that changed absolutely everything about my life, my career, my perspective, my understanding of what really matters in this world. It started on a cold, miserable Tuesday evening when I missed my flight from Los Angeles to Boston. I'd been in LA for a medical conference, one of those exhausting 3-day events, where you network until your face hurts from fake smiling and your feet ache from standing in heels on convention center floors. I was supposed to catch the 7:15 p.m. flight home, but the traffic from downtown LA to the airport was a nightmare. An accident on the 405 had turned what should have been a 40-minute drive into a 2-hour crawl. By the time I burst through the airport doors, rolling my suitcase behind me and practically running toward the check-in counter, it was 7:23 p.m. I could see my gate on the departure board, closed. No, 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 I muttered, rushing to the counter anyway. Please, I need to get on that Boston flight. Please tell me there's still time. The agent, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, barely glanced at me. Gates closed. Aircraft door is sealed. Next available flight to Boston is tomorrow morning at 6:35 a.m. Tomorrow morning. My voice rose in pitch. I can't stay overnight. I have a huge presentation tomorrow afternoon. I need to get home tonight. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. I can rebook you on the 6:35 if you'd like. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I just stood there, feeling the weight of exhaustion and frustration pressing down on me. My presentation wasn't until 2 o'clock. If I caught the 6:35 a.m. flight, I'd land at 3 p.m. East Coast time, way too late. I'd have to cancel, reschedule, disappoint my boss who'd already been questioning my performance lately. Fine, I said, defeated. Book me on the morning flight. I turned away from the counter, pulling my suitcase toward the airport exit. It was raining outside, of course it was, a cold, driving rain that matched my mood perfectly. I'd have to find a hotel, probably pay a fortune for something near the airport, try to sleep for a few hours, and then come back in the early morning. As I stood under the overhang outside the terminal, trying to summon an Uber on my phone, I noticed her. She was sitting on the ground about 20 feet away from me, tucked against the wall in a pathetic attempt to stay dry. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old, with dark hair plastered to her face by the rain and clothes that were soaked through. In her arms, wrapped in what looked like a thin, inadequate blanket, was a baby. Maybe 6 months old, maybe younger. The baby was crying, that weak, exhausted cry of a child who's been crying for too long. I tried not to stare. LAX, like most major airports, has its share of homeless people, and I'd trained myself over the years to look away, to not engage. It was easier that way. Safer. Less complicated. But I couldn't stop glancing at her. At them. The mother and baby huddled there in the rain, invisible to the hundreds of travelers rushing past with their suitcases and their important places to be. My Uber was still 12 minutes away. I stood there, shifting my weight from foot to foot, trying to focus on my phone, on my emails, on anything except the young woman and her crying baby. Then the baby's cry changed. It became more desperate, more distressed. The mother was trying to soothe the child, rocking back and forth, but her movements were slow, exhausted. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I found myself walking toward them before I'd consciously made the decision to do so. "Excuse me," I said, crouching down so I was at eye level with the young woman. "Are you okay?" She looked up at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and haunted. Up close, I could see she was even younger than I'd thought. Maybe 22, 23 at most. Just a kid herself, really. "We're fine," she said automatically, her voice hoarse. "Thank you." "You don't look fine," I said gently. "You're soaking wet. When's the last time you ate something?" She didn't answer, just looked down at her baby, who had quieted slightly but was still whimpering. I opened my purse and pulled out my wallet. I had about $60 in cash. I held it out to her. "Here. Please. Get yourself and your baby something to eat. Get somewhere warm." She stared at the money like it was a mirage that might disappear if she blinked. I can't take your money." "Yes, you can," I said, pressing it into her free hand. "Please. For your baby." She looked at the cash, then at me, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. God bless you." I should have left it at that. I should have walked away feeling good about my small act of charity, and caught my Uber to whatever overpriced airport hotel had availability. But I didn't. Because as I stood up to leave, I really looked at this girl, and that's what she was, really, just a girl with a baby and nowhere to go, and something inside me broke. "What's your name?" I asked. "Maria," she said quietly. "And this is Isabella." "Hi, Maria. I'm Sarah." I paused, then made a decision that my rational mind screamed was insane. "Listen, I missed my flight and I'm supposed to go to a hotel for the night, but I live here. In LA. My apartment is in Santa Monica. It's empty, I've been gone for 3 days. You and Isabella could stay there tonight. Get dry, get warm, get some sleep." Maria's eyes widened. What? No. No, I couldn't possibly. "You're sitting in the rain with a baby," I said. "It's November. It's cold. My apartment is empty. It seems stupid for you to be here while a perfectly good, warm, dry apartment sits vacant." "But you don't know me," Maria protested. I could rob you or something." I laughed, surprising myself. "Could you? You look like you can barely stand up, and you have a 6-month-old baby." "I think I'll take my chances." "She's 7 months," Maria said automatically, then seemed to realize what she was agreeing to. "Are you serious? You'd really let us stay in your apartment?" "I'm serious," I said, even as a voice in my head screamed that this was crazy, dangerous, stupid. "I'll get a hotel room near the airport, come back in the morning for my flight, and you can stay at my place for the night. Tomorrow, we can figure out. I don't know, resources, shelters, whatever you need." Maria started crying in earnest now. I can't believe, why would you do this for a stranger?" I thought about that. Why was I doing this? I'd walked past homeless people 1,000 times in my life. I'd donated to charities, sure, but I'd never invited someone into my actual home. What was different about this moment? Maybe it was the baby. Maybe it was seeing someone so young so desperate. Maybe it was my own exhaustion and frustration making me reckless. Or maybe, somewhere deep down, I was tired of being the person who looked away, who stayed safe, who never got involved in the messy reality of other people's pain. "Because you need help," I said simply. "And I can help. So I should." 20 minutes later, I was in an Uber to a hotel, and Maria and Isabella were in another Uber to my apartment in Santa Monica. I'd given Maria my house key, my actual house key, not a copy, since I didn't have a copy with me, along with my address and instructions on how to get in, where the towels were, what food was in the fridge. The Uber driver taking me to the hotel had looked at me like I was insane when I explained I'd just given my key to a homeless woman I'd met at the airport. "Lady, no offense, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," he said. "You're gonna come home tomorrow and your place is gonna be cleaned out. TV, laptop, jewelry, gone." "Maybe," I said, staring out the window at the rain. "But maybe not." I checked into a Holiday Inn near the airport, went up to my room, and sat on the bed for a long time, phone in hand, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't even have Maria's phone number. I had no way to contact her, no way to check that she'd made it to the apartment okay, no way to know if she was actually there or if she'd taken my key and sold it, or if she'd let her drug dealer boyfriend in and they were currently loading up my TV and computer into a van. I pulled up the app for my apartment building's security system. I'd installed a smart camera in my living room about a year ago, partly for security and partly so I could check on my cat when I traveled. My cat. Oh God, I'd forgotten about Mr. Whiskers. Well, at least Maria would find him and hopefully remember to feed him. I opened the camera app and switched to the live feed. The image loaded slowly, then resolved into my living room. And there she was, Maria, sitting on my couch. She'd changed out of her wet clothes into what looked like my bathrobe. Isabella was on the couch beside her, wrapped in a clean towel, no longer crying. Maria was eating something, it looked like she'd made herself a sandwich, and crying while she ate. Just silent tears streaming down her face as she chewed. I watched for a few minutes, feeling like a voyeur but unable to look away. Maria finished her sandwich, picked up Isabella, and carried her toward the bathroom. I switched cameras, I had one in the hallway, and watched her go into the bathroom. A few minutes later, I heard water running. She was giving the baby a bath. For reasons I couldn't fully explain, I started crying too. Just sitting there in my sterile hotel room, crying while I watched a stranger bathe her baby in my bathtub. I must have watched that camera feed for 2 hours. I watched Maria give Isabella a bath, then wrap her in a clean towel and carry her to the bedroom. I watched her make up the guest bed. I saw her pause when she saw it, like she couldn't believe there was an actual bed for her to sleep in. I watched her feed Isabella a bottle. She must have had formula in her bag. I watched her rock the baby to sleep, then carefully lay her on the bed surrounded by pillows. And then I watched Maria go back to the kitchen, make herself another sandwich, and eat it standing up while more tears rolled down her face. After she finished eating, she went to the living room and just stood there, looking around at my apartment like it was a palace. She ran her hand along the back of my couch, touched the books on my bookshelf, looked at the photos on my wall. Then she went back to the bedroom, climbed into bed next to her sleeping baby, and turned off the light. I finally closed the app and tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. Who was Maria? How had she ended up homeless with a baby? Where was Isabella's father? Where was Maria's family? What sequence of events, what tragedies or bad decisions or terrible luck had led to her sitting outside an airport in the rain? I must have drifted off eventually, because my alarm jolted me awake at 4:30 a.m. I got ready quickly, checked out of the hotel, and headed back to the airport. My flight was uneventful. I slept most of the way, exhausted from the stress and emotion of the previous night. When I landed in Boston, I had 17 missed calls from my boss and 23 emails about the presentation I was supposed to give. I called in sick, said I had food poisoning, promised to reschedule. My boss was not pleased, but I couldn't bring myself to care. All I could think about was Maria and Isabella in my apartment, and whether they'd still be there when I got home. I'd booked a return flight to LA that same evening. I told my boss I needed to pick up something I'd left at the hotel, that I'd be back in Boston the next day. She was annoyed but agreed. 6 hours later, I was back in LA, in another Uber, heading to my apartment. My hands were shaking as we pulled up to my building. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and headed inside. The elevator ride to the fourth floor felt like it took forever. I walked down the hallway to my door, noticing absently that everything looked normal. No police tape, no broken door, no signs of drama. I knocked. I don't know why, it was my apartment, but I knocked. A moment later, the door opened. Maria stood there, looking cleaner than she had the night before but still exhausted. Isabella was in her arms, awake and quiet. "You came back," Maria said, and she sounded genuinely surprised. "Of course I came back," I said. "This is my apartment. I thought maybe you'd just given it to us. I thought maybe you were some kind of angel or something." She stepped back to let me in. I walked inside, half expecting to see my belongings gone, the place trashed. Instead, my apartment was cleaner than I'd left it. The dishes were washed and put away. The floors had been vacuumed. The bathroom was spotless. "You cleaned my apartment," I said, stunned. "It was the least I could do," Maria said quietly. "You gave us a place to stay. A safe place. Somewhere warm. I can't. I don't have words for what that meant to us." I set down my suitcase and turned to really look at her. In the light of day, in clean clothes, she was wearing my sweatpants and t-shirt, which I'd noticed missing. Maria looked even younger than I'd thought. She had a pretty face, with high cheekbones and large dark eyes, but there were shadows under those eyes and awareness that spoke of hard experiences. "Maria," I said gently, "what happened to you? How did you end up at the airport?" She looked down at Isabella, running her hand over the baby's soft hair. "It's a long story. I've got time," I said. We sat down, her on the couch, me in the armchair across from her, and she told me her story. Maria had grown up in a small town in Arizona. Her parents were immigrants from Mexico who'd come to the US before she was born. They'd worked hard, saved money, gave Maria and her two brothers a good life. Maria had been a good student, planning to go to college to become a nurse. Then, when she was 19, she met Carlos. He was older, charming, told her she was beautiful. She fell hard. When she got pregnant at 20, Carlos promised they'd get married, raise the baby together. Her parents were disappointed but supportive. But after Isabella was born, Carlos changed. Or maybe he'd always been that way and Maria just hadn't seen it. He started using drugs. He became controlling, then violent. Maria's parents begged her to leave him, but she was scared. She had a new baby, no job, no money of her own. One night, Carlos hit her while she was holding Isabella. That was the breaking point. Maria packed a bag, took her baby, and left. She went to her parents' house, sure they'd take her in. But Carlos had been there first. He'd told them that Maria was on drugs, that she was unstable, that she was going to kidnap Isabella and disappear. He'd been so convincing that her parents believed him. When Maria showed up with the baby, her father, the man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to ride a bike and helped her with her homework, told her to leave and not come back until she got herself together. She tried to explain, to tell them the truth, but they wouldn't listen. Carlos had poisoned them against her. With nowhere else to go and no money, Maria started living in her car. She'd park in different places each night, trying to stay safe, trying to keep Isabella fed and warm. She picked up day labor jobs when she could, worked under the table for cash, but it was never enough. Then her car broke down. Completely dead, unfixable without money she didn't have. She was stranded in LA, a city where she knew no one, with a baby and whatever she could carry in a backpack. "Where will you go?" She looked away. "I'll figure something out. I always do." "That's not a plan, Maria. You can't just go back to the streets with a baby. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, I interrupted. And here's mine, you stay here. For now. Until we figure out a real solution. I can't ask you to do that, Maria protested. This is your home. Your life. I can't just invade it. You're not invading it. I'm inviting you. I stood up, pacing now, my mind racing. Look, I'm gone half the time for work anyway. The guest room just sits empty. You and Isabella can stay there. In exchange, you can help out around here, cleaning, cooking, whatever. But mainly, you focus on getting back on your feet. We get your ID situation sorted out. We look into resources, programs, job training. We make a plan. Why would you do this? Maria asked, crying openly now. You don't even know me. I'm getting to know you, I said. And from what I've seen so far, you're a young mother who's trying her best in impossible circumstances. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life. Everyone deserves that. That conversation happened 6 months ago. And in those 6 months, my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. Maria and Isabella moved into my guest room that day. It was awkward at first, we were strangers, after all, learning to live together, to navigate each other's habits and boundaries. But gradually, we found our rhythm. I helped Maria get a copy of her birth certificate, then her ID. We found a legal aid organization that helped her file a restraining order against Carlos and start documenting his abuse. We looked into custody issues, made sure she had legal rights to Isabella secure. I called in favors from friends and colleagues, found Maria a part-time job at a pharmacy, entry-level, but it was a start. She worked while I watched Isabella, or we found a daycare that had sliding scale fees. Maria was incredible. She worked hard, saved money, took online courses toward getting her pharmacy tech certification. She was organized, grateful without being obsequious, determined to build a better life for herself and her daughter. But more than that, she became my friend. We'd stay up late talking about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, our failed relationships. She told me about her hopes for Isabella's future. I told her about my own loneliness, how my career had somehow become my entire identity, how I'd looked up one day and realized I had no close relationships, no real connection to anyone. You weren't lonely, Maria told me one night. You were just waiting. Waiting for something to change. Waiting for a reason to let someone in. She was right. I'd been sleepwalking through my life, going through the motions, successful on paper, but empty inside. Maria and Isabella had woken me up. 3 months in, something else changed. My company announced layoffs. My division was being restructured, and my position was being eliminated. After 12 years with the company, I was out of a job. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt relieved. Like the universe had given me permission to stop, to breathe, to reconsider what I actually wanted from life. I used my severance package to do something I'd always dreamed about, but never had the courage to pursue. I started a non-profit. An organization dedicated to helping homeless mothers with children. We'd provide temporary housing, job training, legal assistance, mental health support, all the things Maria had needed and couldn't find. Maria was my first hire. My first success story. My inspiration for the whole thing. We called it Isabella's Hope, Maria's idea, named after her daughter who'd survived those terrible weeks on the street and emerged healthy and happy on the other side. That was 3 months ago. We've already helped 8 families. We're small, operating out of a rented office space with a staff of 3 and a lot of volunteers. But we are making a difference. Real, tangible difference in real people's lives. Maria is our client services coordinator. She meets with every family that comes through our doors, shares her story, gives them hope that things can get better. She's remarkable at it, empathetic without being patronizing, tough when necessary, endlessly compassionate. Last week, Maria moved out of my apartment. Not because I asked her to or because we had a falling out, but because she was ready. She'd saved enough for first and last month's rent on a small place of her own. It's tiny, a one-bedroom in a less-than-great neighborhood, but it's hers. She signed the lease with tears streaming down her face. I have my own home, she kept saying. I have a job, and a home, and my daughter is safe and fed and happy. A year ago, I was sleeping in my car. How is this my life? You worked for it, I told her. You fought for it. You earned every bit of this. I had help, she said, looking at me. I had someone who took a chance on me when she had no reason to. Someone who saw me as a person worth saving when I'd stopped seeing myself that way. We both cried then, hugging in her new empty apartment while Isabella toddled around exploring. People ask me all the time if I regret my decision that night at LAX. If I ever worried that Maria would rob me, hurt me, take advantage of me. The answer is no. Not once. Not for a second. Was it risky? Absolutely. Could it have gone terribly wrong? Sure. There's an alternate universe where Maria was not who she appeared to be, where I came home to an empty apartment and a hard lesson about trusting strangers. But in this universe, in this timeline, something beautiful happened instead. I found a friend. I found a purpose. I found a reason to believe that small acts of kindness can ripple out in ways we can't predict or control. Last night, Maria called me late. It was almost midnight, and I almost didn't answer because I was exhausted from a long day at the office. But something made me pick up. Sarah. Her voice was shaking. I need to tell you something. My heart jumped into my throat. What's wrong? Is Isabella okay? Isabella's fine. Everyone's fine. I got a call today. From my mother. I sat up straight. Maria's parents. The ones who'd turned her away when Carlos poisoned them against her. What did she say? She said they know the truth now. Carlos got arrested, domestic violence against his new girlfriend. When the police investigated, they found out about his history, about what he did to me. My parents found out they'd been lied to. That I'd been telling the truth the whole time. Maria's voice cracked. My mom was crying. She apologized. She said she was sorry for not believing me, for turning me away. She wants to meet Isabella. She wants to be part of our lives again. Maria, that's wonderful. Isn't it? I don't know, Maria admitted. Part of me is so angry at them. They should have believed me. They should have protected me. But another part of me just wants my mom. I want Isabella to know her grandparents. I want my family back. Then take it slow, I advised. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It means deciding that the relationship is worth trying to rebuild, one careful step at a time. You don't have to rush. You don't have to make any big decisions right now. When did you get so wise? Maria asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I learned from watching someone incredibly brave rebuild her entire life from nothing, I said. Someone who taught me that rock bottom isn't the end of the story. It's just a really difficult chapter. I love you, you know, Maria said suddenly. Like a sister. Maybe even more than a sister, because you chose me when you didn't have to. You're my family, Sarah. No matter what happens with my parents, you'll always be my family. I felt tears rolling down my face. I love you too, Maria. You and Isabella both. After we hung up, I sat there in the dark, thinking about that rainy night at LAX. About the young woman sitting against the wall with her baby, looking like the end of the world. About the impulse decision I made to offer help to a stranger. My rational mind had screamed that it was dangerous, stupid, reckless. And maybe it was all those things. But it was also the best decision I've ever made. Because yes, I gave Maria and Isabella a place to stay. But they gave me something too. They gave me purpose. They gave me perspective. They reminded me that life is happening right now, in the messy, complicated, beautiful moments when we choose to see each other, to help each other, to open our doors and our hearts to people who need it. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with a family, a mother with 3 kids, living in their van, trying to stay one step ahead of child services, who want to put the kids in foster care. She's terrified. Desperate. Probably feeling like the world has forgotten she exists. I'm going to look her in the eye and tell her the truth. You are seen. You matter. Your children matter. And we are going to help you. Because that's what Isabella's hope does. We see people. We help people. We remember that everyone has a story, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen, willing to help, willing to take a risk on a stranger to change the entire trajectory of someone's life. Was handing my house key to a homeless woman with a baby at the airport a mistake? Maybe by conventional wisdom, yes. But by any measure that actually matters, by measures of compassion, connection, purpose, love, it was the smartest thing I've ever done. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches a story like this all the way to the end. That says everything about who you are. Subscribe now. Join our community. And let's keep changing the world together, one story at a time.